favorite radio station.
This is Afro Vibes Radio Houston.
This is a Total Medulla production.
You want to advertise on Medulla Talk? Well, contact Total Medulla at totalmedulla.com.
Too many MCs, not enough mics, not enough mics, not enough mics.
In a world where everyone is asleep, I'm awake. I am Christopher Mukes.
Having different perspectives and outlooks is key to growth. I'm Gerald Jarman.
I don't claim to know everything. I just claim to know where to look. I'm Stephen Hawkins.
I just slid right in. It's no big deal. I'm Kyle Lee. Devontae called me up on short notice.
Coming to you from the Afro Vibes Radio Houston studios, Total Medulla Entertainment presents Medulla Talk with your hosts, Devontae Hill and Stephen Hawkins. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Medulla Talk. I'm your host, Devontae Hill. Let's get this thing started. Something in my throat. It is Monday, October 9th, and for those of you who are listening on Afro Vibes Radio Houston on the app on Thursdays, welcome in, as well as the folks who are watching on YouTube. We're lucky to have you. Make sure to get your popcorn and get ready to go. You about to say something, Stephen?
You guys didn't see that probably, but like some phlegm totally came out of his mouth onto his computer.
That did not happen.
When he
That was
coughed.
not accurate.
It's actually probably the grossest thing
That's,
I've ever seen.
That's not at all what happened. That's okay. No, this is episode 4, and it's titled, Let's Talk About This Gun Control Debate. I mean, it's obviously after the shooting, it got sparked up again, and so we want to try to take the mystery behind it. I'm here with Stephen Hawkins, but according to some of you ladies out there, apparently he is Mr. Dark Chocolate.
Yeah, baby. Big chocolate
Does
pussy.
he have to be Mr. Dark Chocolate?
Yeah.
Only if you're nasty.
That's okay. Let's move on. We also have Kyle Lee. Kyle, you don't have a nickname. It's just kind of.
I don't need a nickname. Kyle is memorable enough.
What the? Yeah. He just said his name. I looked away for 2 seconds.
And Muhammad, I guess you had such a great time last time that you decided to come back.
Yep. Yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah.
No, he just never left. That's what.
Yeah, I just stayed here.
We're holding his family hostage.
And I'm not going to forget, but this episode we don't have Gerald. So people don't blow me up for saying you forgot about Gerald. I didn't forget about Gerald. He's not here today, but he did leave you guys a really sweet letter. Well,
God.
sweet as...
You mean a manifesto?
Baby, come back. You can blame it on
And this is why I'll be running for mayor.
So you guys will be able to enjoy that in the next segment. So yeah, today we got a good show for you. I interviewed some folks this weekend, asking them, are you less willing to go to concerts or group gatherings based off the shootings that happened? I got their thoughts on that. And then when we come back from break after that point, we have the group discussion. We find ourselves in a constant loop after a mass shooting. Something happens, we have a gun control debate, and then it gets quiet. Mm-hmm. What can we do, or what should we do to stop these things from happening in the future? We're gonna get to that later in the episode, but for now, let's get into what what am I trying to say? The word on the street.
I feel like that was supposed to be a little bit more,
Which street do you live on?
You're like off the tongue, but
It's
you really botched that.
We're gonna move on now. Are you less willing to go to public gatherings or like concerts or whatever because of what happened in Las Vegas?
No. I would honestly, still go to events like that, honestly, only because I've been in a major accident in my life before. And someone just taught me, hey, you got to live and you got to keep living your life. Don't let someone or something stop you. Don't let it put a hindrance on your life.
It would be like the incident that happened at the movie theater when Dark Knight came out.
Oh, yeah.
That'll stop me from going to the movies now. I mean, it's a sad situation, but I'm not going to let it make me live in fear of one concert. I think it's easier to be in a horrible car accident, as there's odds are more toward that than it is to have any issues at these concerts and whatnot. So
more and more police departments are getting more and more used to, which can be a bad thing too, because they're having to get used to, training for this kind of stuff. But for me, I don't feel like it's something that I need to rule my life, because if you stay inside all the time, you never really live your life. I mean, yeah, you're gonna, have a lesser chance of running into that, but if something like that happens, it's beyond my control. All I can do is try to be as safe as possible.
I interviewed a security expert. He goes by the name of John Matthews, and he wrote the book Mass Shootings, 6 Steps to Survival. And, part of it is just being aware of your surroundings, what to do, where to hide, what happens if, things of that nature, and it's also one thing to just make sure you're protected yourself, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Make sure that, you are aware of your surroundings. Look at everything while you're having a good time. So while you're out there enjoying yourself, make sure that you are on your P's and Q's. Let it be on the back of your mind. But don't let that fear take over the moment of you trying to have a good time.
I feel that. Do you feel like people in general are more concerned with like domestic acts of terror or domestic terrorism, or like something like from outside the country coming to harm you?
Honestly, I really think a lot of people aren't worried. Not necessarily that they aren't worried about it at all, but they don't think about it. People don't, put education into it until it hits home.
Yeah, that's true.
But definitely between the two, I would definitely say domestic violence. Unfortunately, if stuff does happen overseas, it's, probably people think, hey, it didn't happen to me, it didn't happen to my people, it didn't affect me, so I'm not affected by it. So honestly, sometimes it does take stuff to hit close to home before it actually affects you. So between the two, I would definitely say domestic. But honestly, I really feel at times that people aren't educated about it at all.
I really don't know what other people think. I think a lot of people are afraid of a lot of things. And
yeah.
I'm a lot more afraid of what's going on in this country than I am anywhere else, and, the outside forces. But, there's just a lot of goofy crap going on here, and whether it be violence or politics or whatever, I think we all have to kind of, look at our own house and clean that up first.
It's hard to say which one more. I think all terrors are, concerning, but I don't know. It's just the way things have been going. I feel like it could happen at any time to anyone, and, the source could be anyone as well. So I think it's equal concern on both ends for me.
I don't know, with New Vegas incident, that was the largest act of domestic terrorism that has ever hit the country. It kind of looks like it's getting bigger and bigger, and I think more of the psychologically troubled population are feeling like this is the only option, and they're not getting help like they need to be helped. Where internationally, I wouldn't say they're psychologically troubled as much as they are, I guess you could say, bred to be that way, to think that they need to do this to prove a point.
Basically, they're more concerned about terrorism from the Muslims,
mm-hmm.
crazy, rather than the terrorism that goes on here from the people that actually cause terrorism.
Right.
Well, it's a combination of both in a sense. From domestic terrorism, I don't want to, people are going to say, why he's letting race into it. But, as a person of color, domestic terrorism is predominantly a white person. So let's be real on that one. They're at your churches, they're at your concerts, they're at your schools. So
movie theaters.
As a person of color, I'm sorry?
Movie theaters, that's,
Absolutely. So as a person of color, it's kind of concerning that, someone from another country wants to put harm to you, and then someone in your country wants to put harm to you as well. Which goes back to the saying, don't let that fear override your moment of trying to have a good time.
Right.
But, that's why we have certain laws that, we feel as if we can protect ourselves against those type of situations. That's why we have gun laws and sword laws and whatnot. as funny as it sounds, but hey, take advantage of that type of stuff.
Appreciate that, man.
Absolutely.
So what did you guys think about that?
Thought it was interesting. The one thing that kind of jumped out at me immediately is that like everyone, and a lot of people made this very good point, is that, oh, well, I mean, yeah, it happened, but I mean, I can still go do what I want to do, right? And it's almost as if we're becoming like numb to like this type of, like cycle. It's like the refractory period. I don't mean to get like weird, like, because that's typically it's typically a term that's used for the time it takes a guy to get ready to go again after sexual intercourse.
Yeah, too late.
But but I think that is very apt. Our refractory period after a mass shooting has changed, where we immediately, the very next day now, like used to be, hey, let's take like a couple weeks not to talk about politics. Now it's the next day. Now it's, hey, this happened again. Let's start arguing again. And then the conversation even lasts less now.
Well, no, what happens is the conversation goes from us talking about the actual situation to us bickering about something else. Like it goes from, hey, a shooting happened, to we need to talk about gun laws, to is this person a terrorist, to if this would have happened to a person of color, to if this person was Muslim, to it bounces, it never sticks to the original topic.
And we got to make sure that we really touch on that in the next segment. But yeah, when we come back from break, we're actually going to get into the discussion about gun control and how we can start having a more productive conversation with it. How do we break the cycle? See you guys after the break.
We the best on Afro Vibes Radio. We are 24/7, so don't change that dial. Just leave it on.
Man, women really seem to be dominating the talk show game. And when it comes to male-led talk shows, they're only talking about entertainment, sports, or music. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the only place I can get deep conversation about stuff coming from black males is either through a sermon or from Neil deGrasse Tyson. Anyway, luckily, Afro Vibes Radio Houston has Medulla Talk. It's literally the embodiment of diversity of thought from a male perspective. We have people from all walks of life and from different backgrounds come to the show and share their thoughts. We discuss social norms, news headlines, philosophy concepts, Houston local issues, as well as common curiosities. Best of all, we aren't afraid to give you that real.
There's a difference between voting and getting involved in the process or having a peaceful protest and stuff like that and busting out windows, beating up people. We cannot get to the point where we try to stop hate with our own anger.
It's Medulla Talk, the diversity of male thought. You want to advertise on Medulla Talk? Well, contact Total Medulla at totalmedulla.com. Welcome back to Medulla Talk. Now, back in college, I did a segment on gun control for my school's TV station.
That no one watched. I keep it real.
That's kind of messed up, man.
I'm messing. People watched it. I watched it. I was a good friend.
No. But no, I talked about the history of the debate and the issues with it. And as we approach the end of 2017, we're still in this debate. And at the end of the day, we have to, as a people, we have to decide on what we want. Do we want to do anything about this issue, or do we want to just consistently be in this cycle and continue the status quo? Well, today we're going to talk about the gun control debate and possibly offer some good solutions. But before we get into the discussion, I do want to bring up Gerald's letter, because Gerald knew that he wasn't going to be able to be a part of the show today.
Here we go. Oh, goodness.
It's really interesting. So this is Gerald's letter.
It's a lot of
you have to start out like he does it. So like I was saying.
That's a lot of exclamation points right there.
I love this guy. I hope you're getting better, Gerald. Tell him where Gerald is.
So Gerald had, I don't really want to get too far into it, but essentially he had to get his wisdom teeth taken out. But this is his.
Oh, this is the best time to call him.
Say whatever. Anyway, continue.
Okay, so I am a democratic socialist, similar to Senator Bernie Sanders. Guys, you're gonna have to help me out here. Okay, you're gonna have to help me out.
No, he didn't.
I haven't even gotten through the first sentence. I believe in the people in this country, and they have the right and deserve the right to afforded to them by the Constitution. I believe that food, labor rights, and clean environment, housing, healthcare are all fundamental rights. I also, however, believe that you have a right to protect yourself, your family, and others. Given this country's history with violence, the ability for one to protect themselves is an unnerving idea, leaving you with limited options. The state will repress you, given the opportunity, and leave you with little to say about how the nation is governed. Corporations will not help you without a profit motive. Also, any gun control measure will end up targeting minorities, and the poor are almost exclusively and disproportionately punished by them. Additionally, I think the collective punishing of the many for the sins and the mistakes of a few is morally wrong. So how do we reconcile the issue of public safety and the rights of the people? Gerald, will please tell us what you're talking about.
He doesn't believe in utilitarianism? That's strange. I thought for sure that was it.
The solution, I think, is multi-pronged. We must reinforce firearm classes in schools so that people from a young age will learn proper firearm safety. Guns will become a demystified, commonplace tool again. We should invest in anti-poverty measures and rebuild our social safety net, as poverty is a major cause of crime. While we're at it, let's fully fund our educational system, since there's an enormous effect on poverty too. The state has failed at regulating and enforcing current gun laws, so I propose that a federal unified state license should be created that covers all classes of weapons, and a valid state license should be issued through all states and territories. We must revive our mental health services so that the near dead blow by the Reagan administration gave what is he talking about? He's like going on a rant here.
Well, it's not a complete rant. He actually that is relatively true.
Yes, we must revive our mental health services for the near death blow that the Reagan administration gave it, so that we can better serve our citizens. Finally, and most importantly, we must summon the power to execute and maintain these ideas. Half measures will not lead us back. Well, half measures will only lead us back to the status quo. I am Jared Drummond, and I approve this message.
That was pretty solid.
It was.
I'll tell you, he does believe in utilitarianism. I was mistaken earlier.
It's a great statement. It's just, I love how he's like, well, since we're fixing stuff, let's fix poverty and world peace and racism.
This is often the problem, is that since everything's so interconnected, we always want to tack more onto the bill.
He's absolutely right. Those things lead to a lot of the situations that we experience, but it's like, wow. It's asking a lot from people who don't care.
So we're going to break this down into 3 different parts. But the first thing I want to do is go to Muhammad, because you happen to be an expert.
So disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. Doesn't have my political science degree. All right, so let's talk about the law.
Yeah. How did this whole thing start?
So essentially, with the Second Amendment, let's do a quick reading. The Second Amendment essentially says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Essentially, that is people see that as a core constitutional right? Now, the jurisprudence is for the Second Amendment is very relatively new. So in 2008, there was a case called D.C. versus Heller. Essentially, 6 residents filed a suit in D.C. against the Firearms Control Regulations Act of 1975. This law essentially restricted residents from owning handguns, excluding those grandfathered prior to 1975 and possessed by law enforcement officers. So, the Supreme Court, as well as the D.C. Circuit, reversed the district court's decision. Both the courts essentially argued that the Second Amendment protects an individual right to keep and bear arms, and that right existed prior to the formation of the new government under the Constitution. It's premised on the private use of arms for activities such as hunting and self-defense. Now, a lot of people claim that the Second Amendment is essentially for self-defense purposes, and the court argued that this is a right that predated the establishment of the Constitution, essentially to use as a means to resist the depredations of a tyrannical government or a threat from abroad. And of course, they also talked about how this is a right used for state militias to call to arms whenever there's a foreign entity or whenever they need to go to war.
About like Red Dawn or something like
Essentially,
that.
yeah, it was a terrible movie though.
Maybe the original one where like, you know, the Russians come in, the Chinese like attack us. Yet, you know, we all got guns, so
So essentially what the court argued is that they said to DC that this law is unconstitutional. You cannot restrict people from owning handguns in your homes to use as self-defense. So they overturned this law. Now, 2 years later, in 2010, there's another case called McDonald v. Chicago. Essentially the same law, right? Chicago, in comparison to gun control laws, DC has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. Probably the strictest. And
not California?
Yeah, possibly. And so in this case, McDonald v. Chicago, Otis McDonald, he wanted to own a handgun for self-defense purposes. He lived in a neighborhood which saw a lot of gang activity. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, he files a suit against the city, claiming that his Second Amendment right is being infringed upon, his right to self-defense. Now, the Supreme Court looks at this case and says, oh, wait, we essentially ruled on a case similar 2 years ago. Essentially, that case ruling was applied to DC. It's not a state, it's a federal entity, right? Mm-hmm. So what the Supreme Court did was, okay, the Second Amendment is a constitutional right. People have the right to self-defense, and therefore we got to apply this right to states, countrywide, nationwide, right? And so they use the 14th Amendment, the Due Process Clause, and incorporate this constitutional Second Amendment to the states. And they, of course, as a result, overturn the regulation in Chicago. So the dissenting opinions in both cases argue that the individual right in the Second Amendment
glad you looked those up.
was not express. What the dissenting opinion...
Go ahead, repeat that again.
The dissenting opinions in both cases argue that the individual right in the Second Amendment was not express. The right to bear arms, right? What they mean by not express is that if the framers wanted to have that listed as an individual right, they would have clearly written it out. Justice Stephen Breyer writes, the Second Amendment was not written in order to protect a private right of armed self-defense. No consensus that the right is or was fundamental.
Was that a strict constriction, like a strict view of the Constitution from over there?
Well, from the dissenting opinions?
Yeah, from the dissent. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Because typically I would think that, you know, like someone who would be arguing for more regulation for, like, you know, gun laws would be more along the lines of wanting have a loose constriction of the Constitution and saying that, oh, hey, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. We should make laws that fit us today rather than laws from like a million years ago that don't necessarily have much to do with going on with everyday problems that we have right now.
See, you know, there's another problem in the ruling in these court cases, especially the first one, DC versus Heller. You know, the late Justice Scalia. Mm-hmm. He's a fan of originalism. Yes. And what originalism is essentially is you look at the statute and you use it according to the times of when it was written. So you go back to 1787.
Back in the good old days.
Yeah, back in the good old days. And he's the closest supporter of originalism. He's not complete. He's not a complete endorser of the concept, but he's closer than any other justice on the court.
Exactly.
And of course, Neil Gorsuch, he's likely to follow in his footsteps. But that's the issue with this ruling, is that you're looking at antiquated language. You're trying to define what the law was written during those times and apply it to the current times, to the modern day.
Exactly.
Right? But so basically, there are two sides to this, to what I said, right? One argues that a person's right to self-defense should not be infringed, while the other side argues that public safety concerns, to an extent, should supersede a person's right to self-defense. And so it's a balance. And my thoughts is, given the rise in mass shootings in America, and how this is happening at a increasing rate, I think the government and its job is to regulate such behavior, is that they have to pay more attention to public safety concerns.
So that kind of leads into, I guess, the first question I had for this whole debate is, what's more important, the right to use guns for self-defense or the public safety?
Rights bubble. None of the rights actually supersede each other. So essentially, there's a thought process where we have essentially my right and your right. My right to have something cannot infringe or come into your rights bubble. So essentially endanger you, and to the point where it's and therefore superseding your right to be safety. So I can't sit here and just wave a gun at you. That's assault. That's essentially assault. And at that point, that's where we realize is that that's where the boundary is. As long as what I'm doing doesn't affect you and what you're doing doesn't affect me, or whatever laws you use to protect you doesn't necessarily keep me from being able to function or to enjoy my rights.
So basically what you're saying is you have the right to own as many guns as you possibly can without looking like a strange gun nut, while me across the street can have my gun in self-defense from fear of you, and it's not encroaching on either one of our amendments.
Well, essentially what that's saying is that I can't have a tank, something that I'm not trained or I am not technical enough to be able to maintenance properly or do anything along those lines. I can't mess around with a tank and have one with weapons and stuff like that around you. Like that's superseding your right for safety in the neighborhood.
Okay.
So,
okay, I get what you're saying.
That's an extreme point.
So that would be the limit.
So essentially, like that's where the limit. That's where the
line gets crossed.
So let me ask a question: what is the difference between a semi-automatic rifle and a tank?
So semi-automatic rifle is a lot easier to get than a tank.
But as far as
but it's legal. It's legal at the moment.
But my question is, you said that a tank is not something would be. I can't own a tank, right?
You can own a tank.
You can.
It just has to be disabled.
Yes.
Okay. And what's the reasoning for the tank having to be disabled?
So it's a highly destructive weapon.
So that's why I ask you, what's the difference between a semi-automatic rifle and a tank? Because a tank is a dangerous weapon. A semi-automatic rifle is a dangerous weapon.
Size matters.
But lethal they're both lethal.
The title of our next show, by the way.
And so is diabetes. What'd you say?
Continue, Steve.
What's the title of what?
You said size matters. I said that's the title of our next episode.
Oh wait, what?
But anyway,
man, I'm way behind, guys.
I understand what you're saying, but I mainly understand what Devontae is saying. He's basically saying they're both dangerous weapons, but the reason why this one's more dangerous, obviously, tanks can level buildings. And
right.
Can
well, the police can't
things.
Come in and stop you if you have a tank.
True.
Like
you can run over the cops. If you know.
They could put throw some grenades and stuff.
They'll have probably their own tanks.
If the police officers, they'll have
That's one of the big things. Like I've actually heard of random people in like the country who randomly have like tanks and stuff like that, and that's a specific thing. Like the local law enforcement wouldn't be able to stop you if you started to go on like a super rampage. If you had like if you had a semi-automatic weapon, you're still able to be stopped because it's not up to the level of like a fully automatic.
What is? I guess we can probably touch on this.
And
later
it's a little arbitrary, but that's where the line has been drawn. So
we can probably touch this on in a later section of the show. But I do want to pose the question of what is the need for certain classes of guns.
Well, I always figured handguns is more of a self-defense.
Yeah, to me, a handgun is fine.
Yeah.
If you want, I mean, obviously, I'm gonna be really upfront with you guys. I really don't give a damn about a gun. A gun to me is a very useless tool, considering the fact its main purpose is to kill whatever's in front of it. Like you can't use that tool for anything else.
That's why anytime I hear someone say, "Oh, well, knives are dangerous," when to get rid of knives. Knives are designed to cut things.
Yes, you can kill somebody with a knife. but you can also cut vegetables with a knife.
So it's a gun. There's no other alternative reason to have a gun. You don't hammer in nails with the handle of the gun or anything like that, or you're not shooting off light switches to turn.
Why do cars go over 70 miles an hour?
Because people are impatient and they want to get to where they're going faster.
No, but if our laws pretty much prohibit us from driving over 70, 80 miles an hour, why do our cars able to do it?
But my question to you, Stephen,
our
is
laws may say we can't do it.
The point I'm trying to make is
that
it's a part of the whole idea of American excess. It's the laissez-faire nature of our country.
The problem with that, with your whole
you're saying
example,
cars can be driven from this place and they're not meant to just kill people, right?
That's my point.
Basically,
you can't make a gun out into anything else but what it is, and it's truly a tool, like a lot of things, but the tool is very limited.
The whole invention of the gun, going back to the ages, was used for warfare.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so the purpose was just to kill people.
Well, they also use it to
back
hunt,
to
but
the
obviously
cannon.
we're not talking about hunting rifles. We're talking about
No, you don't need a gun to hunt. Like you can hunt with a bunch of other tools.
You know how hard it is to hunt with a bow and arrow?
You know how much skill it takes you to hunt with a bow and arrow? I have respect for people who can actually hunt with a bow and arrow.
You think marksmanship with a rifle is somehow less impressive
Stephen,
than using a bow and
let me
arrow?
ask you this. The invention of the gun, do you think, of course we would have to do research, but do you think it was used to help humans hunt or help humans
No,
win
it was
wars?
used for entertainment. The Chinese invented gunpowder.
The Chinese did not make a gun.
Gunpowder is
the Chinese did not.
Allow me to.
Chinese did not make the gun.
Allow me to exaggerate. Exaggerate. Allow me to keep going. So the Chinese created an explosive powder that could shoot a projectile out.
Gunpowder.
Exactly. They not only used this for weapons, you've seen Mulan, you know what they did, but they also used it for entertainment.
But they didn't design a gun for entertainment.
For tricks. Well, what I'm saying is that the simple act of being able to fire a projectile at extremely high speeds is a source of pride, a source of entertainment. It's not necessarily always used as a source of a weapon.
Is that why people buy guns? So they can feel like they're
It's a power thing.
It's a power thing.
It is the same reason why people buy muscle cars. It's the same reason why people do anything excessive. It makes them feel not only safer,
feels American.
It makes them feel and it feeds into and mitigates the insecurities that they might have already.
Insecurities, perfect. Because I think that's what it is. It's this fear of something that may hurt you that you'll probably never come in contact with. There are so many people who own guns that literally will probably never use them. The only time they use them is at the gun range.
Wait, how else could you use it?
What's wrong?
Self-defense.
How else can you use a gun? You can't use it for a daily use.
If you go to a gun range, and because you can only use a fishing pole at a lake, but I'm saying it's like.
And the gun range, I don't have any issues with gun range.
This is like why can't they have a high-powered weapon? Like using it at the gun range.
No, that's fine.
There's laws. You can't fire that thing randomly.
Yeah,
like you have to go to
gun
certain
ranges
places.
are completely different. That to me, that's fine. I'm talking about like at the house in the city. If you live like in the city of Houston, there is literally no need for a semi-automatic.
What's the purpose of having a rifle that you can only use at the gun range? Like clearly you're doing it for, like you say, entertainment,
which is fine.
But if that's the case, why bring it home, load it up, and then keep it in your house for it to
locker fees? Why would you want to pay extra locker fees to keep it at a gun range where somebody could steal it?
I do want to ask you a question, Stephen. I know in some of our show notes here you wanted to talk about the NRA. What should we do about the NRA? Because it seems to be a constructed
burn them with fire, but not always.
It seems to be a entity that kind of gets in the way of progress as far as actually having a constructive conversation about this.
Okay.
Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm over talking on this, but in the NRA kind of chaps my hide a little bit, and I understand what the grassroots level, what it was supposed to be. Actually, before there are more recent people that are been in control of it, like with before 1940, like they were actually more for regulation than anybody else was.
What made them not be so into it?
Politics. Makes more sense to essentially get money from gun manufacturers and other people that hold FFL licenses essentially allowing you to manufacture, ship, and do anything that commercially or even to do with guns or ammunition or anything along those lines. They get about 50% or more of their contributions from those type of companies, as well as they do get some of their contributions from actual like individual like gun and rifle owners.
You're talking about people who have like memberships.
Exactly. So essentially, it's the same issue that's going on with the oil lobby. How they'll push to keep keep back certain innovations that will leave them inert or somehow incapacitated. And we can't necessarily expect businesses not to do that.
Well, but that goes into a whole nother conversation about lobbying in general. And
Muhammad,
I talked to you off camera about how I hate the fact that money equals speech.
Yeah.
I mean, same thing happens in the pharmaceutical industry. Same thing happens.
We really need to get that taken care of.
Yeah.
But let me ask you guys this: how come we can't seem to talk about this constructively? Like there seems to be a disconnect. I was watching a bunch of news earlier today, and the lady who's a host of Fox News, it was Fox News, so I kind of knew what I was getting into.
Mm-hmm. What you trying to say about Fox News?
I'm trying to say it's trash. Anyway, but she brought in a person to her show to talk about gun control and
Bush.
Right, but it ended up being just a fight fest. It was just like, this is what I believe. Why are Democrats doing this? And she's like, well, this is actually what this is. And Hillary Clinton did this. And and they started bouncing all over the place. And had no.
They really mentioned Hillary.
They did. They were digging deep. But even if you go on the street, non-media related conversations, it seems to be a very difficult thing for us to really talk about. Why is that the case?
I mean, well, first and foremost, we don't actually want a solution. We don't.
Interesting.
And
by we,
and I know
what do you mean by we?
No, I'm saying we as a country don't want an actual solution because we're status quo people. If we really wanted a solution, we would compromise. But we don't want a solution. We want our solution. We want our thoughts. We want our thing to go through. And if anything less than it or anything different or necessarily something that we didn't come up with, we fight it tooth and nail.
So essentially, you're saying the country has become stuck in their echo chambers, right?
Yes, they have.
Yeah. Why do you think? Okay, I guess that would probably lead to the reason why we're so reactive about a lot of things and not proactive. Like we never really try to do some pre-planning.
Because if you look at the situation that happened last week, they literally, all the news outlets, thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers.
Yep.
Now's not a good time to talk about this.
Yep.
We should talk about this later. Right
but
now,
you have
we need
to do
to
it
focus
first.
on healing.
Yeah.
No, we have to focus on healing and prayers, and we must.
This is
all
a horrible
ask,
time to talk about.
We
this.
need to figure out why is this person this way instead of them asking why this person this way. We need to say how did this person get access to these things and how are we going to fix this? How are we going to limit this? You're right. Mm-hmm. The society has become very numb to the idea of this happening. It doesn't hit home until it happens in your home.
Yeah.
And that's when people begin to become more proactive. It's a shame that it has
Give
to be
them some
that
claps.
No, I don't need
that. No. I'll tell you why.
Because okay, go ahead.
I liked what you said. It doesn't hit home till it's in your home.
Yeah.
That's so real.
Because I cannot tell you how many people don't show up to these town hall meetings until they've, a family of mine was killed by the cops, or a family of mine was killed by this, or this happened to this person, and that's when they show up to speak. But majority of the time, most of the speaking we do is on social media or, in our own houses. We never actually voice our opinions to people who can actually change the landscape of it. And then you also got to voice it to a person who would want to change that landscape.
Yeah. And if any of you guys who are listening to the show have anything you want to voice, Muhammad Jamal is the perfect person for that. Yeah. So just to throw that out there.
I just want to. I had one thought. I was thinking about Las Vegas, and I was talking to my friend who lives in Dallas, and I was asking him what's his thoughts are, and he was telling me that he thinks, this is an interesting perspective that he has, but he thinks the average person in America, the way they process it, the way they internalize a mass shooting is they first look at how many people have died.
Yep.
Instead of, oh, okay, it was a shooting.
Yeah, they look at
did 100
body
people
count.
die?
Yeah,
They
and they move on.
Same thing for the hurricane. He was like, how many people died? 17 or 16? Yeah, more people died during Katrina. So you guys are lucky. Like that mindset of like, well, it wasn't as bad as
it's
what happened
relativism.
10 years ago.
It's
relativism.
relativism.
Yeah.
And you know, it can be helpful sometimes to look at things relatively, but also detrimental. It, you know, oh yeah, we just had like, you know, 100,000 people die last year of smallpox.
Yeah.
But you know, at least it wasn't the millions that it used to be. So
yeah.
we must be doing better.
Because you know, some people, you can frame that like they say the same thing in a war. Like, oh, you know, we lost hundreds of soldiers in this war, but that war we lost thousands.
How many did they lose?
Well, that's a war. So you know, that's combat. Where this is you have natural disasters, and then you also have terrorist attacks that aren't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
That happen.
Yeah, that happened, and that have been become accepted as just a norm in society now.
And this happened, you know, that whole situation happened at a concert where people weren't expecting it. So, you know,
just minding their own business.
Basically, so the idea that, oh, you know, if those people were carrying weapons, would they have been prepared? No, no one's actually prepared for that situation.
You know what? That goes into the last part of this whole discussion. I want to tackle each myth individually. Every little aspect that happens during this debate. So the first thing I had, which is one of my favorites,
oh goodness,
is good guy with a gun beats bad guy with a gun.
No, yeah, absolutely no.
Question,
That's not going to happen in
How-
this situation. Definitely not.
How long did this altercation last? I'll ask you this.
Las Vegas?
You talking about Las
Yeah,
Vegas?
Las Vegas.
How long was it? Was it?
I don't know how long.
12 minutes. Do you want to know why it only lasted 12 minutes?
Why?
Because 4 men who were trained with weapons. These are police officers, by the way.
Okay, yeah, okay.
They went up there.
It's
These
taking a
are
long
good
time
guys
to get
with
to that.
guns. Go
They're
up
police.
there
No,
and
I
they
think-
solve the problem.
No, they're police. They're not civilians.
See, and that's what I'm saying. Is it's like I hear what you're saying. Oh, hey, random people shooting up there. Yeah, that's not gonna solve anything. But you can't bring a gun to a cop, like to a concert anyway. And no one's saying to.
Well, no, but that's what a lot of people
somebody
are-
said that.
Sean
Who said?
Sean Hannity.
Who said that?
He was basically saying
Sean
like
Hannity said what? Read me this quote. I know you got the quote. Read me this quote.
But he basically said, would you rather have Sean Hannity, who's trained in firearms, in the crowd helping you get to safety, or would you rather have a bunch of people without weapons? And he's basically referring to like, if I had a pistol, if I had a weapon, that person shooting from that high level, we would have been able to defend him.
Okay, we're speaking from hindsight. We don't. Back then, no one knew who was shooting, where they were shooting from, how many were there. This is hindsight. We
Dude,
now know he was on the 30
music playing first off, so you probably don't even hear the gunshots properly.
Yeah,
you probably don't notice what's happening until you see, you know, maybe
Blood,
someone fall
or like
So the idea of, and I just because it's a country music concert, and you can say what you want, but there's a lot of people who like guns that listen to country music.
You trying to say that it's ironic that a lot of conservatives were getting shot up?
No,
at a country music concert.
No, I'm just saying there's a lot of people because even the singer, his whole group, they all have guns. They had guns on the bus.
Yeah.
So the idea of a bunch of people turning to shoot at a shooter, and you don't know the approximate position the shooter's in.
Yeah.
You have to also account bullet drop, distance, wind. Like your bullets might not even make it to that
There's
window.
a bunch of people in
When did you learn the word bullet drop?
Video games. But anyway, but basically, yes, 4 police officers stopped them because they are also trained to do so.
This was also an extreme situation.
Yeah.
Someone walks into a convenience store and tries to rob it. You have a gun on them. You can kill them right then and there. You can end it right there. And
Are you talking about the clerk, or are you talking about just a random?
I'm talking
civilian?
about just a random person in the store. It's like that's what they're referring to. They're not referring to them launching SWAT efforts.
Stephen, even with that example, why can't we just disarm?
Because
do we have to just end someone's life if they come in?
That's not it. It's a question.
I mean,
kill or be killed.
I mean, I feel like this. It's easier said than done. As a person who does not want to see anyone get killed, doesn't want to see anyone get shot, I completely understand the idea of a person who is defending themselves, especially in a situation like that. If someone busts into a convenience store and points a gun at your face, but you have a gun and you're ready to shoot them, or they take their eye off you for 1 second, you get ready to draw. That's a special situation where it's either you or that person.
Yeah,
because it's not always promised that if you give them the money that you're like
it's true.
Safe.
Just when I used to live over in the Bel Air neighborhood, there's a pizza place where like literally there's some kid just working in like the pizza place late at night. Guy comes in, robs it. After he steals the money, he shoots him in the face.
Oh wow!
Like stealing used to be, oh hey, I'm gonna shoot you, or if you don't give me your money. And they're like, oh, okay, well, here, take the money because, the money's not worth my life. Well, now they'll take the money and take your life. That's what people are afraid of.
So does that say something about just our society then? I guess my question is, what part of this chain needs to be fixed? Because if it's a person issue, then we need to start doing things to help the people.
God, I hate to say it. Gerald had a point where he was talking about poverty. There is a lot of issue where poverty does influence certain crimes.
Yeah.
A lack of funds or, the living conditions.
But even with that, though, the example that Steven said, if it was truly about the money, he would have taken the money and walked out. He wouldn't have ended that little kid's life.
Now
no, he was a teenager. I don't want to make it sound like he was like a little
teenager.
Kid.
Sorry,
yeah,
still
a young person,
but still, someone who was actually
like
just
if it was
working
truly
for
about the
college.
money.
Yes,
once you got the money, you're done. You got what you wanted.
Precisely.
You could leave.
So it obviously that speaks to something
that's
else.
Deeper. That's
deeper.
Way deeper.
Yeah, that's deeper. Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, like, this issue is just like what Gerald's saying. We gotta both keep people from getting the guns, and we gotta keep people from wanting to use the guns to hurt people. Like that. Like that's the two-pronged thing.
I always had a question.
Do you do that?
Are these good guys the same people who open carry their weapons to put out the idea that they're protecting people?
Like Chick-fil-A and whatnot?
Some of this is a power thing. Like, to be perfectly honest with you, open carry is a power thing.
Absolutely.
It's to make it's a deterrent.
It's an accessory.
It's supposed to make it's like a Coach purse.
Yeah. It really is.
No, but in all seriousness, it's supposed to make you realize, hey, you don't want to shoot up in here because, I've got a gun, that guy over there has a gun. You'd have to take us all out before we get you. It's supposed to be like a strength in numbers type of thing. When and really it just turns into like a blind intimidation thing. Sometimes.
Really, it is because I've seen so many. I mean, you read about it sometimes. Or there's like a car accident or a disgruntled driver who, maybe got cut off and somehow the altercation ends in someone getting shot.
Yeah,
and this person legally has a gun, blah blah blah. But it didn't have to end that way. That's the person's actual anger getting the best of them, and this person has a gun. It's like some of these people who have these guns, who have the right to bear these arms, don't always have the best mindset or the best intentions with these weapons. Guns were always supposed to be designed for self-defense, but a lot of people bring these guns out looking for trouble. Like, you can say what you want about the Trayvon Martin case, but George Zimmerman shot him because
he was looking for trouble.
He was looking for trouble.
No, just to be honest with you.
Say, you can say you felt threatened all you want, but you approached this person with your weapon. So clearly you have the intention. You don't have handcuffs. You don't have any license, no badge. You have the intention to hurt or intimidate. So it doesn't really justify a person to have a weapon and say that they're protecting a person or protecting themselves when they go out in public. The gun isn't going to protect you from all things. You can get hit by a truck. Just the gun ain't going to stop you from that.
It's true. But
it's not going to stop a car accident.
No one's going to rob you with a knife. You got a gun.
But no one robs with a knife anyway.
If they get,
not anymore.
No, Gerald, if they get, first off.
Gerald.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry.
Gerald,
Steven,
where are you?
Steven,
I need you.
Steven, if someone approaches you with a knife and you don't get to that sidearm in time, they win. They have that knife to your throat. There's nothing you could do about it.
That's true.
Now, granted, if you see them approaching you from a distance, you draw your gun. That's one thing. But most people aren't going to announce that they're going to hurt you. They're going to get up close and hurt you.
Or I was going to just say, like, in most cases, when the average person is confronted in a dangerous situation, especially if it involves their life, a lot of other factors are going to kick in. Adrenaline, fear.
Oh, yeah.
Fight or flight.
Unless you're prepared,
fight or flight, right?
Yeah, unless you're prepared for that moment. Mentally, you can freeze.
Yeah. And at that moment, I can see why people, why they would feel like, oh, if I have a gun, I would feel more secure. But going back to this Vegas situation, this guy, he was very calculated.
Yes.
He chose 32nd floor as a vantage point, essentially shooting fish in a barrel.
From the buying of the weapons,
Yeah.
it was pure genius.
Yeah, from different states.
He still had his California license.
Yeah.
So he bought it from California, bought from the state he was living in, Nevada, and bought some from Texas as well.
Hey, Steven, we talked about this yesterday, but you never elaborated. So that's a special case where he had that bump stock and just turned his weapons.
Yeah.
What would be the prime reason? I understand the reason why people may have rifles, for hunting or whatever. Because it's semi-automatic. What is the exact purpose of a person having an automatic weapon?
Well, I will tell you the reason why people have bump stocks is good old fashioned American innovation right there.
Of course.
So it's basically people trying to get using innovation to get around laws.
Yes,
It's the American tradition, goes far back as
Yeah.
Revolutionary War. We do these things.
That's why they used to make moonshine.
And that's what the point. We have to regulate things as they come.
Should we explain what bump stocks are?
Yeah.
Bump stocks, they just turn you turn your semi-automatic rifle into the automatic rifle. There's more into it than that, but I'm just trying to
it makes it
simplify.
perform more likely.
Yeah,
It just shoots them faster.
Yeah.
So it turns it into a somewhat automatic weapon.
3/4 automatic.
So I want to go into another myth, and that is guns don't kill people. People do. That's usually something that's thrown out, during this debate. And my answer to that is, you're right. Guns don't kill people. Guns are inanimate objects, but people use guns to kill people.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen the increase of pianos dropping on people, so you can't say pianos kill people. It's definitely the person, but it's the person's tool of choice.
Yeah,
and it happens to be a gun in most killings.
Well, it happens to be efficient.
It does
I'm
its
gonna
job
let that
well.
one slide, but
it does its job very well.
It's very efficient.
Let it be bumpy. I don't care.
Pianos, it takes a lot of work. You got to carry it up.
Yeah, you got to hang it
what
on
else
wire.
is efficient at killing? Sugar, heart disease, diabetes.
That's a long game.
Strokes.
That's a long game.
Cars. That's a Gerald move right there. Just completely changing the subject.
Yeah.
Hey, I got like a list of the number of deaths number of deaths and the leading causes of deaths pulled up on my screen right now.
All right, go for it.
All right, I'm about to hit you with that. Heart disease, 630,000. Cancer, 590,000. Chronic lower respiratory disease, 155,000. So on. Accidents, closer to that. Stroke, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, influenza.
I'm gonna stop you
and
right
all
there.
the way at the bottom. All the way at the bottom.
I'm gonna stop you right there because everything you just named are things that people either do to themselves or it's genetic.
Thank you. You don't choose a bullet to the head.
Yeah, the person who was at the concert at Las Vegas was not like, you know what? I'm going to self-inflict myself with this bullet.
Oh, you ready for self-infliction is only 44,000, but a lot of those are guns. I will say that.
But no, everything
I will
else,
say a lot of those are guns.
diabetes. That's diet.
No. What I'm saying, what I was trying to say there is that this is actually part of the reason why we can't have an argument about this is because it's just where the data is at the moment.
Because someone's gonna say, well, no, actually, sugar kills people more than guns.
It does.
I know
it does.
But no, but that's not what kills people. What kills people is people's decisions.
Yeah.
Eating high sugar foods. So again, that's a self-infliction.
But they're inflicting it on themselves rather than someone else inflicted it upon them.
That's my biggest point with all those.
Yeah. Well, all I'm saying is that stuff kills a lot more people than gun deaths do. Now, what I will say is a huge caveat here, and part of the reason why I kind of wanted to talk about that is part of the whole discussion with the gun debate. We don't have data. If we do anything, we have to do something to repeal certain laws or at least amend them in such a way that we can actually research. To
add to that, there is data. The problem is that it's by interest groups.
Yeah,
that's where the issue is. So Stephen is correct and not correct at the same time.
Excuse me.
Because
no, there is a typical day. How's that any different than like every other?
They're not letting the CDC get research data for these types of things.
Yeah,
because they believe that the CDC and the ATF and any government entity is biased.
Okay, what do you guys think about mental illness? Usually when people talk about this debate, they say it's a mental illness issue, mental illness.
Well, that's usually what people mention. I know the guy's brother, he talked about how his the guy was very rich and helped make money for him and his family and didn't have an issue and he could be whatever he wanted to be and do whatever he wanted to do. So basically saying he showed no signs of mental illness, but at that point, in his case, it was a straight decision that person made to do this. Mental illness isn't always involved in a person's decision.
Guys, this guy legitimately cut himself off from his whole family.
He did.
He cut himself off from other people. And if they crack the nut that is his girlfriend, they're probably going to find out that he was even walled off in his own home.
Yeah.
Now, would that entirely make a person
he
crazy,
sent
though?
his girlfne off to the Philippines, right?
Exactly. He sent her there so that she wouldn't, and set it up that $100,000, not a policy. It was literally he just set aside $100,000 for her to essentially, hey, I'm going to do this. I know I'm not making it.
Mm-hmm.
And there you go.
Here's some money. Here's a trip to the Philippines. Enjoy. So I guess what we need to do is redefine mental illness, because usually when people throw mental illness, they're referring to like crazy people, right? Instead of looking at mental illness as
disturbed people.
No, I wouldn't even say disturbed. Mental illness can hit anybody.
Yep.
Right? Mental illness to me is whenever you're mentally not at a great state.
Do you want the statistics on mental illness as opposed to the National Alliance on mental illness?
Honestly, it's not going to help because
no. 1 in 5 Americans felt had some sort of mental condition this year. Dealt with some sort of mental, some sort of.
Do you think
episode.
most of those occurrences happen from personal experience? Like, for instance, if you've been in any type of traumatic situation.
Oh yeah,
it's not just one-time trauma though. It's it's a string of things.
Yeah, my point I was going to get to was like depression. Depression hits a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people are one layoff away, one breakup, from going insane.
Yeah, they are.
Like they're on the edge of.
Some people are on the edge for a whole year.
You know what'll fix that? A little bit of Jesus. Nah.
Yeah, because then you'll go fully off the edge.
No comment at all. Sorry,
Muhammad and I are going to have to disagree on that one.
Yeah. Oh, I can only guess why. Anyway.
Well, let me ask you this: is that with mental illness, how is there an actual definition, right? Because some people who I've talked to about their parents, they say oh, my mom's schizophrenic. They just say it so nonchalantly. Do you know what schizophrenia is the actual symptoms or the behavior a person shows, or bipolar disorder, right? But a lot of people just generalize certain behaviors and group them.
Oh, they have multiple personality disorder, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's that one. That's dissociative personality disorder. My mother's actually does deal with that stuff. That's why I know exactly what you're talking about. People do talk out of their they talk out of their whenever they're talking about mental illness because we don't understand it.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have an interest in understanding.
Yeah, that's true.
If it's not something that we're personally dealing with or
Again,
a family member, then we're just like,
Do you want to know why we don't want to understand?
Unless you experience it, you don't really know. You don't have enough information, and you don't want to talk about it.
Because each and every one of us has mistreated someone with mental illness. The moment when we actually figure out that it's not their fault, that they're different, it's not their fault that they were suffering with this stuff, the moment we have to actually look at ourselves and realize, hey, maybe that kid that had that weird masturbation problem back in high school in the back room, maybe I shouldn't have made fun of him. Maybe that kid that used to just kind of always twitch, always do this, couldn't focus, couldn't do this, couldn't do that. Maybe I shouldn't have treated him like shit back then. And that's not really a personal story on me, but I know people that talk about people that they used to know back then. I'm like, guys, that kid probably wasn't all the way right, guys. That it's not his fault.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think about the slippery slope theory?
Explain a little bit more.
So when I was watching my favorite station, Fox.
Why are you watching so much Fox News lately?
No, you kind of have to watch what they talk about.
It's actually pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I watched enough of it. I'm good.
But okay, so one of the ladies was saying how, if they give the Democrats, one piece of legislation, they're going to keep asking for another and another and another until they basically take everybody's guns away. And a lot of folks think that that's actually going to happen. That they think that Democrats want to take people's guns away. Muhammad, what is your opinion on? Oh, okay, I see your face.
Yeah.
So it's all premised on the argument that you want to have a gun to prevent a tyrannical government, right? The way the country was founded, it has a violent roots, right? Violent history. As well as they won their independence through the use of violence, through the use of the gun, right? But that's what living in a democracy means, right? When you live in a democracy, people have to compromise on certain rights. They can't retain all their natural rights and expect the same collective harmony to exist in a democracy, right? So there must be some compromise. Now, in terms of people being afraid of the government becoming too tyrannical, well, okay, let's just say that if the government wanted to take away their guns, if they want to become tyrannical, they have the means to. They have drones now, right? They have
bringing a gun to a drone fight is a wasted effort. Like that's you're gonna lose that.
What about a bow and arrow?
You would lose that too. Nothing beats drones.
Surprisingly,
pretty dangerous with a bow and arrow.
that bow will shoot the drone out of the sky without a doubt. You know?
You guys don't even know.
But how much the government spends on the military is I don't know the exact statistic, but it's 5 countries outright. It's the next 5 countries outright. So guns against a tyrannical government is not going to mean anything. Now, if you have your own drones, maybe, but the fleet, the resources.
Who has a military grade drone?
Don't the police?
People are building them like where at the very least they can actually shoot things.
Well, not just that, but like police departments, like they have drones that blow people up if they need to get how they defuse bombs if they can't defuse it.
Yeah, like the bomb. Yeah, they have those like bomb droids.
Yeah. In the DMV, the way they regulate speed limits is through drones.
Okay, but I'm not talking about like a little 5-prong drone that you can get at Walmart.
No, we're talking about we're talking
like
about military grade.
plane.
Yeah. We're talking about what is it? Predators.
You know what I love? The same people who are so afraid of the government are the same people who are like, we need to respect the troops. You better stop taking the knee and you better support the flag. And it's like, but you want to support the people who you're afraid of that will probably come and take your freedom.
Oh, so en contraire, my friend.
Go ahead.
Okay, here we go.
Big words. Okay.
People aren't afraid of the troops. It's not what they're afraid of. They're afraid of a government or a president taking a group of people and essentially saying, hey, get them for whatever built-up political reason, this, that, and the third.
Yes.
They're worried that eventually...
Who's going to be the people getting them, though?
Exactly. They're afraid that, we will be in a certain point of view. Because it's not for the government that's happening today. It's not for the government that's in power today.
No,
it's the government 50
no.
years. It's the government 50 years from now that comes down and says, hey, we're going to do this now. Hey, we're going to do that now. It's the extreme upswings that people are worried about. That one, just like all of a sudden when, I'll forget what president this is, so it's kind of weakens my point. But anyway, that decided that, we're not allowed to have gold anymore. Took all the gold, stuff it all in Fort Knox. We're not beyond. When we took all the Japanese, stuffed them into internment camps. The government.
You know what's funny about that, though? The vast majority of the U.S. population agreed with that move. So, I mean, you guys are afraid of something that you, at the time, were for.
Yeah.
My gun keeps me from having to worry about other people turning against me.
No, but where does this distrust of government come from?
Especially from white people, because white people have never been in a situation where the government was after them.
The number one, most dangerous thing the government can say is, or the sickest or the scariest thing. I learned this in economics class. If you can't tell, my economics teacher was extremely conservative, or one of them, is I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. Or I'm from the government, I'm here to help. That's the scariest thing to a lot of people that they can hear, because when the government helps, people feel that the government tries to tell you what to do, take control, and eventually subjugate you.
But here's the thing. The thing I don't understand is the vast majority of people who are scared of that are white people, and they are literally the only group in the history of America that have not been subjugated to some type of power play from the government.
I think the only thing they're afraid of is taxes. Because if you look at the Oregon group, like they were mad because they taxed their land.
Oh, no, they're afraid of losing their spot.
Yeah.
No. Like,
because
the number one thing and if I'm being completely honest, and it's not supposed to be just kind of
being
like this
honest.
attack.
That's what I'm talking about.
This attack on white people or Caucasians or anything like that, is if I was a white person in this country and I saw more and more of this group of people is growing and growing and growing, and my group of people is starting to deteriorate, specifically because of the opioid crisis and the fact that we have less kids than everybody else, what am I going to think to myself? Am I going to think, oh man, there sure are a lot of them? It's like,
is my government going to change?
It's like, am my government going to change, or is my vote automatically going to mean less than it did yesterday?
It's interesting. I don't want to go off tangent, but I'll just quickly say this. Every presidency in America has transformed American society, right? So looking at
better or for worse.
Better for worse, right? JFK, right? His famous speech is ask not what your government can do for you, but what you can do for your government, right? That's what he's essentially known for, right?
Yes.
But his assassination, and then of course the conspiracy theories that followed after assassination, just supposedly made the public more distrustful of the government.
Yes.
Even though his presidency, that speech was pretty much essentially conveying that trust your government. Be more committed to helping out your government, being for it, being an advocate of it, right? Which is it's so paradoxical. And I think probably from that point on, is probably gotten worse.
You're forgetting one key piece there, my friend. Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam too, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Vietnam is not the reason, but it's a big reason why we don't trust the government.
So let's get into some solutions here. So I did some brainstorming, and I had this idea of not touching guns at all because it's something that's too personal for a lot of people.
This is fun.
What's fun? Anyway, so I was like, all right, how can we limit the amount of deaths unnecessary? I mean, obviously you're not going to make it zero because there's always going to be deaths by guns.
Those are human beings.
Right. But how do I limit the mass shootings, right? I'm really just focused on that. I'm not really focused on the one-on-one or the one-on-3 incidents. And I was like, if there was a way to limit the amount of ammunition you can buy, if we limited the amount of ammunition that Stephen, what was his name? Paddock was able to get, right? Well, and if we had this imaginary world where if the only way you had access to ammunition was either at a gun range or a hunting ground, or if you were in some type of environment like Alaska where you have to fend off, black bears, you have a special permit where this person is authorized to have ammunition due to environment, but then his permit can get revoked if he is caught selling ammunition to other people who don't have permits.
Or attacking or killing black bears.
Right, because black
for no
bears.
reason,
Yeah,
black bears gotta be black.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Continue.
Grizzlies, polar bears, pretty much whatever is up there.
Right.
Any type of wild animal that they're afraid of, not just out there just.
I wondered if we could implement something like that, or if that would actually work as far as solving the problem of just the mass shooting things. I'm not really focused on.
It lets people keep their guns.
Yeah.
If you limit the amount of ammunition that they can purchase at a time or can actually hold,
I would try to figure out a way, depending on environment, where you wouldn't have access to ammunition at all unless you went to a gun range or, you wouldn't be able to have ammunition at your house.
That won't solve the problem because we don't know the problem. We know that there is a problem, but we don't know where the
source is.
Exactly. And the reason being we don't know the source is because we can't study it. And the reason why we can't study it is a little thing called the what is this called? It was passed in 1982 and essentially is called the Firearms Owners Protection Act. Essentially, the CDC or any other government entity cannot do a formal study on guns in that capacity.
Muhammad, who passed that bill? Was that you?
Or consensus.
That was definitely not me. I wasn't even born at that time.
No, it was an NRA-led effort, and it was part of the gun lobby. And we can get into lobbyists one day, but not today. That passed this because they pretty much said that the current law, the 1968 law, that the Gun Control Act of 1968 was allowing the ATF to essentially trick people into breaking laws or revealing small minuscule violations and going from there. That it was in fact infringing on more rights than it was actually trying to protect.
So basically what you're saying, Stephen, is the very first step that we should all do is get this act repealed.
We should get to a point where we can amend it, that we can actually do some study. We have to. Because if we can't study the problem, we can't solve the problem.
I agree with you on that one.
We can't.
Muhammad, you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think, overall what we're hitting on right now is the lack of social capital in American society, right? I'm not saying it's like the solution to this problem, but maybe if as a community, as a society, we got to know our neighbors better, we got to know people in the community better, I think it maybe would prevent person who wanted to do such an act, like to shoot up a public venue, right? And or if they have mental health, you engage them, you include them part of your group, right? I think it can prevent a lot of these incidents from happening if there was more of a community effort to include.
Heck, even in our own families. His own brother hadn't even like just talked. He doesn't even really talk to him.
Right.
Yeah.
Kyle, you got any final thoughts?
No, not really. I mean, all I can say is
you just slid on in.
Yeah, I just slid on. I'm sliding out of this conversation, but
Drift so much.
I mean, you can say what you want. I do think this country absolutely does have a gun issue. I mean, there's no denying that. It also has a mental health issue. It also has a poverty issue. It also has a race issue. This country is full of issues, and no matter how quickly you go to stomp out one fire, there's 12 other fires behind you that are going to spread and reignite that fire you originally stepped out. So there's no proper solution until you are able to study all the appropriate data. And if certain avenues won't allow us to study that data and make assumptions and actually get hard evidence, we'll never fix the issue. People are fine with the fires around them as long as they can control them.
As long as they don't burn their place.
And
absolutely.
And my final thought on that is to basically take this conversation and move it forward. Like, we didn't just do this because we had nothing else to talk about. Like, we wanted to make sure that we were a voice that said, hey, look, this is how the conversation's been going. Let's change that. So it's up to you guys now to make up in your minds of what you really want and actually start changing the narrative. So that's my challenge on you guys.
Talk.
Yes, talk, please.
Talk to each other and like actually listen.
Yeah.
Discuss,
and then we'll vote on it and then we solve it.
Well, I appreciate all you guys being on the show today. And for those listening on YouTube or on the app, thank you for spending time with us here at the Afro Vibes Radio Houston Studios. For today's poll question, do you think people should get after media and Congress for their lack of solution-based conversations?
Yes.
So that's Steven's answer.
That's the answer, guys.
We want to know what your answer is, so make sure you submit your answers on the poll question on episode 4. Just go to totalmedulla.com and look for the episode titled Honest Talk about gun control, about the gun control debate.
Email us.
An email. We actually do read our emails.
Yes, please email us.
I get so lonely.
Yes, email Steven specifically.
Be like, hey, Big Chocolate.
Okay,
like,
we're going to end the show now. That is all we have for today's episode, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Medulla Talk on Afro Vibes Radio Houston. Join the Medulla community at totalmedulla.com, and make sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Total Medulla.